Hello. If you found this video tonight, maybe you needed a quiet moment. The day is over now. The world outside is slowing down. Before the story begins, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. It's always strange to think about how many of us are awake together in the dark. Now get comfortable, take a slow breath, and let tonight's stories begin. When I moved to Niigata for graduate school, I rented a small house at the edge of a fishing town called Izumizaki. It was cheaper than the apartments near campus, and I liked the sea. The house stood at the end of a narrow road lined with windbreak pines. Beyond them stretched the Sea of Japan, gray and flat most days, restless during storms. The landlord told me the previous tenant had left in a hurry, but that wasn't unusual in towns where jobs come and go with the seasons. There was a Butsudan in the tatami room. It was old, but well kept. The landlord said I could store it in a closet if it made me uncomfortable. I decided to leave it. It felt disrespectful to move it without reason. Inside were the usual items: a small incense burner, a bronze bell, two high tablets with post-war dates carved into them. No photographs. The first month passed quietly. I spent my days on campus, and my evenings cooking simple meals while listening to the wind push against the shutters. Then the bell began to change. At first, I thought it was my imagination. When I moved in, the bell produced a clear, high note when struck. I tested it out of curiosity. The sound lingered in the room, thin and bright. One evening, after returning from class, I noticed the tone had deepened. I hadn't touched it. I told myself metal can shift with temperature. The house was drafty. See, air corrodes things. Still, I decided to clean the altar properly. I bought fresh incense from a local shop and wiped down the lacquered wood with a soft cloth. When I lifted one of the hide dust beneath it, I saw faint writing on the wood behind it. Thin strokes, as if written in pencil. It looked like a date, but the format was wrong. Instead of a year followed by month and day, it listed only a day and month. No year. 1017. October 17th. That was 3 days away. I assumed it was left by a child long ago. Perhaps the previous family had marked something. On October 17th, it rained without pause. The sea turned the color of dull metal, and the horizon vanished into mist. Classes were canceled in the afternoon because of wind advisories. I returned home earlier than usual. The house felt warmer than expected. The smell of incense hung in the air. I was certain I hadn't lit any that morning. I went to the tatami room. The Butsudan doors were open. I always kept them closed. Inside, the bell rested slightly off-center, as if recently struck. A thin wisp of smoke rose from the incense burner. My first thought was that someone had entered the house. I checked the genkan. The door was locked. The chain was still fastened from the inside. Every window was latched. When I returned to the altar, I noticed something else. Behind the ahai, the writing on the wood had changed. The previous date was gone. In its place was another. 113, November 3rd. I stood there for a long time, trying to reason through it. Maybe the pencil marks had been smudged, and I'd misread them. Maybe there were multiple faint dates layered over each other, visible only at certain angles. I did not sleep well that night. Around midnight, I heard the bell. Not loud, not struck hard, just enough to produce a low, resonant tone that seemed to come from inside the walls rather than from the tatami room. I stayed in bed, staring at the ceiling. The tone lingered longer than it should have. The next morning, the incense burner was filled with fresh ash. I stopped inviting classmates over after that. I didn't want anyone else to see the altar open or the shifting dates. It felt like exposing something private. On October 30th, I returned from campus to find seawater pooled at the edge of the tatami room. The weather had been calm all day. No rain, no high tide warnings. The water didn't extend beyond the threshold. It stopped neatly, as if contained by an invisible line. It smelled faintly of salt. The Butsudan doors were open again. The date behind the tablets still read November 3rd. I checked the calendar on my phone. For days away, That night, I researched the town's history. Izumizaki had suffered a severe tsunami in 1964 after the Niigata earthquake. Many houses near the shore had been rebuilt. Some plots remained empty for years. I searched the address of my rental house. A local blog mentioned that an older wooden home on that plot had been lost to the sea during the tsunami. The photo attached showed a structure similar in shape to mine, but the coastline in the picture looked closer, much closer. I began to notice small changes. The sound of waves at night grew louder, though the shoreline was several hundred meters away. The air in the house felt damp even when the weather was clear. Sand collected in the corners of the tatami room each morning. On November 2nd, I considered staying at a business hotel in Nagaoka. I even packed a small bag, but something kept me there. Not curiosity, obligation. On the evening of November 3rd, the sky turned an unusual shade of green before sunset. There were no official warnings, no emergency broadcasts. My phone remained silent. Around 7 p.m., the bell rang on its own. Once. The note was deep and heavy, vibrating through the floor. I went to the tatami room. The Butsudan doors were wide open. The high tablets were gone. In their place was a small wooden plaque I had never seen before. It bore my name, carved carefully. Beneath it was a date, 113, no year. The floor beneath the altar was wet. Water seeped between the tatami mats, rising slowly but steadily. I ran to the genkan and opened the front door. The road outside was submerged, not flooded violently, but covered in a smooth, reflective sheet that stretched toward the pines. Beyond them, the sea was no longer distant. It pressed against the trees. I stepped back inside. The water followed, sliding across the threshold without resistance. The house did not creak or shift. It simply accepted the sea. The bell rang again, though no hand touched it. A low tone, sustained and calm. The water reached my ankles, then my knees. It was not cold. It felt the same temperature as the air in the room. I looked once more at the plaque bearing my name. The carved characters seemed deeper now, as if traced repeatedly. The final thing I noticed before the lights went out was that behind the plaque, faintly visible on the wood of the altar's back panel, another date had already been written. 1219. I do not know whose name will be carved next, but the sea has been louder each night, and sometimes, when I pass by the tatami room, I hear the bell testing its tone, as if preparing for the right day. The town of Hainohara has a bus that only runs 6 times a day. I know the schedule by heart now. 6:10, 8:05, 11:40, 14:15, 17:50, 20:30. If you miss the last one, you walk. My apartment sits above a closed-down soba shop near the only intersection with a traffic light. I moved here to catalog local folklore for publishing company. Hainohara is technically part of Tokyo, but it doesn't feel like it. Forest presses in from all sides. At night, the darkness is complete. The first time I saw the extra bus, it was raining. Not a storm, just a steady mountain rain that makes everything smell like wet leaves. I had stayed late at the community center scanning old documents. By the time I reached the stop, the digital sign above it displayed 2103. I remember checking twice. The last bus had already left. I considered calling a taxi from home, but reception in the valley is unreliable. I was calculating the 40-minute walk home when headlights curved around the bend. A bus approached. Old model. The kind with rectangular headlights and a destination sign that uses backlit plastic instead of LEDs. It slowed and stopped in front of me. The door folded open. No destination was displayed. The sign above the windshield was blank. The driver wore a standard navy uniform cap pulled low over his face. I couldn't see his eyes clearly in the dim light. "Is this going toward Kamikawa?" I asked. He nodded once. His movement was slow, as if his neck resisted. I stepped inside. There were 5 passengers. An elderly man in a work jacket, staring at his hands. A high school girl in a sailor uniform, hair damp from rain. A woman holding a child wrapped in a towel. A salaryman with his head tilted back, eyes closed. And near the back, someone seated alone on the raised platform. I couldn't see that person's face. The interior lights flickered softly. The air smelled faintly of soil. I tapped my IC card against the reader. It made no sound. The display didn't change. "Is it broken?" I asked. The driver did not respond. I took a seat near the middle. The bus pulled away. At first, the route was familiar. We passed the abandoned gas station with rusted pumps, then the narrow bridge over the river. But we didn't stop at the next scheduled stop. No one pressed the button. No one moved. Rain traced slow paths down the windows, distorting the trees into long, vertical smears. After several minutes, I realized we hadn't passed any houses. The road outside had become a single unbroken stretch of forest. I leaned forward and looked at the digital clock above the driver. It read 21:03. Still, I checked my phone. No signal. The time read 21:03. I felt a tightness in my chest. I turned slightly in my seat to look at the other passengers. The elderly man's hands were caked with dark mud. The high school girl's socks were soaked, though the bus floor beneath her was dry. The child in the woman's arms was too still. The salaryman's eyes were open now. He was staring directly at me, not blinking. I looked away quickly. We approached a stop I didn't recognize. There was no shelter, no signpost, just a break in the guardrail and a narrow path leading into dense cedar trees. The bus stopped. The door opened. No one moved for a moment. Then the person seated on the raised platform at the back stood up. They were taller than I had thought. Their head nearly brushed the ceiling. As they walked forward, I saw that their face was wrong. Not disfigured, just unfinished. The features were faint, like a face seen through frosted glass. They stepped off the bus into the forest. The door closed. The bus moved again. My heart was pounding so loudly, I was sure the others could hear it. I leaned toward the aisle and whispered to the high school girl, "Do you know where this bus is going?" She turned her head slowly. Her eyes were clouded, unfocused. "I missed my stop," she said. Her voice sounded distant, as if coming through water. I pressed the button, but it didn't stop. She lifted her hand. There was no stop button above her seat, only smooth metal. The bus continued deeper into the mountains. The road narrowed. Branches brushed against the sides, though I heard no scraping. We stopped again. This time, the elderly man stood. As he shuffled toward the door, clumps of mud fell from his sleeves, leaving no mark on the floor. He stepped off into darkness. The forest seemed to swallow him immediately. The door closed. The digital clock still read 21:03. I stood up abruptly and moved toward the driver. "Please let me off at the next stop," I said. No response. I reached for the cord above the window. There was none. I moved closer to the front. The driver's hands gripped the wheel tightly. His knuckles were pale. "Excuse me," I said louder. He turned his head slightly, just enough for me to see his face. There were no eyes beneath the brim of his cap, only smooth skin, the shape of a face without openings. The bus began to slow. Ahead, through the windshield, I saw something that made my legs weaken. A row of buses, identical, parked in a line along the roadside. Their doors open, their interiors dark. Some of them were filled with silhouettes. Others were empty. Our bus pulled into the line. The engine cut off. The door opened. The salaryman stood and walked toward the exit. He did not look at me as he passed. Outside, the forest was silent. No insects. No wind. Only the faint hum of engines idling in other buses. The woman with the child rose next. As she stepped off, the towel slipped slightly. I saw the child's face. It was the same as the driver's. Smooth. Unfinished. When it was my turn, I stayed seated. "I'm not getting off," I whispered. The high school girl was the only one left besides me. She was staring straight ahead. "You can't stay on," she said softly. "Why?" "Because this is the last stop." The interior lights went out. The only illumination came from the buses around us, their headlights casting long beams through the trees. I stood slowly and walked toward the door. The ground outside was not asphalt. It was compacted earth. And beneath the thin layer of soil, I could see something pale. Shapes. Layered. As if the forest floor had been built up over time. The girls stepped off behind me. The bus door closed. I turned to look at the driver one last time. He was facing forward again, waiting. The engine started. The bus pulled away without headlights. It disappeared into the trees. All around me, the other buses remained. Their doors open. Inside one of them, I saw myself, sitting in the middle seat, looking out the window. The digital clock above the driver read 21:03. The version of me inside slowly turned its head. Our eyes met. Its lips moved. I couldn't hear the words, but I knew what it was saying. You missed your stop. Behind me, I heard the folding door of a bus open. Another engine starting. Headlights sweeping across the trees. I haven't seen the 2030 bus in Hainohara since that night. The schedule at the stop still lists 6 departures. But sometimes, when it rains and the valley loses signal, a 7th set of headlights appears around the bend. And if you're still waiting at 21:03, it will stop for you. When I was in middle school, my friend Kana showed me how to find abandoned places on satellite maps. You look for roofs that don't match, she said, dragging the screen with her finger. Too clean or too dark. Or a road that ends for no reason. We grew up in a coastal town in Shizuoka Prefecture. Between the ocean and the mountains, there were plenty of places left behind. Old love hotels swallowed by vines, closed down clinics with faded kanji on cracked walls, farmhouses sinking into tall grass. One evening during summer vacation, Kana messaged me a screenshot. At the edge of town, beyond the last row of houses, a narrow road curved into a patch of forest. At the end of it stood a single building. Its roof was bright blue. Too bright. Even on satellite view, it looked freshly painted. But neither of us had ever seen it in person. We biked there the next afternoon. The road existed, but it was thinner than it appeared online. Grass grew through the asphalt. Cicadas screamed in the trees. When we reached the bend, we expected to see the blue roof immediately. There was nothing, just more forest. We walked our bikes farther, pushing through low branches. The road ended in a small clearing filled with weeds and broken concrete blocks. No building. Kana frowned and checked her phone. We're right on top of it, she said. The blue roof was clearly visible on her screen. We stood in the center of the clearing. The GPS pulsed over the image of the building, but in front of us, there was only air. I remember feeling embarrassed, as if the forest were quietly laughing at us. Maybe it was demolished recently, I said. Kana didn't answer. She took a step forward and disappeared. There was no dramatic moment. No sound. She was simply there 1 second and then not. I froze. Her bike fell sideways onto the weeds. Kana? I called. My voice sounded wrong, swallowed too quickly by the trees. I stepped forward to where she had been standing. For a split second, the world shifted. The air in front of me rippled, like heat rising from asphalt. Then I was somewhere else. The forest was gone. I stood in a narrow hallway with blue walls. The color matched the roof from the satellite image, bright, almost childish. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and seawater. At the end of the hallway was a window. Beyond it, I could see the ocean, but it was too close. The waves were pressed right up against the glass. Kana? I whispered. My voice echoed softly. A door to my left stood ajar. Inside was a small room with tiled floors and a single metal bed frame. No mattress. On the wall above the bed hung a framed photograph of the clearing we had just stood in. Only, in the photo, the building was visible, and 2 bicycles lay in the weeds. No people. I backed into the hallway. From somewhere deeper inside the building, I heard footsteps. Light. Unhurried. Moving across tile. Kana, stop messing around, I said, though my throat felt tight. The footsteps continued. A door opened somewhere out of sight. Then another, as if someone were checking each room methodically. I ran to the window at the end of the hall. Up close, I saw that the ocean wasn't moving. The waves were frozen in mid-crest. The sky above it was the same pale blue as the walls. There was no horizon, just water pressed against glass. The footsteps grew closer. I turned and saw Kana at the far end of the hallway. She stood perfectly still. Her back was to me. "Kana," I said, relief flooding me. She didn't respond. She took one step forward, then another. Her movements were slightly delayed, like a video buffering. When she turned around, her face didn't match. It was her features, her eyes, her nose, but arranged with subtle errors. Too symmetrical. Her expression was neutral, almost polite. "You saw it," she said. Her voice was layered, as if two recordings were playing slightly out of sync. "Saw what?" I asked. "The roof," she replied. Behind her, the doors along the hallway began to open one by one. Inside each room stood something that looked almost human. Different ages, different clothing, all facing the hallway, all watching. "You weren't supposed to come in," Kana said. "I didn't mean to," I said. "Let's just go back." She tilted her head slightly. "Back where?" The photograph in the room to my left shifted. I could see it from the corner of my eye. The image of the clearing now showed only one bicycle. Mine. The other had vanished. My chest tightened. "Kana," I whispered. She smiled gently. "The map updates," she said. The figures in the rooms began stepping into the hallway. They moved carefully, as if afraid of making noise. Their faces were similarly precise and wrong. I ran. I didn't know where I was running to. The hallway seemed longer now. The blue walls stretched endlessly, doors multiplying on either side. Every few steps, I glimpsed another photograph hanging inside a room. Each one showed the clearing, each one with fewer details. The concrete blocks disappearing, the weeds thinning, the road fading, as if the outside world were being simplified. Ahead of me, I saw a shimmer in the air, the same distortion from before. I threw myself toward it. For a moment, I felt resistance, like pushing through plastic wrap. Then I was back in the forest. The clearing was exactly as before. My bike lay in the weeds, alone. I stood there for a long time listening to the cicadas. I checked Kana's phone, which she had dropped. The satellite image had changed. There was no blue roof anymore, just forest. I told the police. She had wandered off. Search teams combed the area for days. They found nothing. A week later, I checked the map again. The clearing was gone. In its place, the forest canopy was seamless. No road, no concrete blocks, no sign that anyone had ever stood there. Sometimes, late at night, I open the map and scroll slowly over our town. I look for roofs that don't match. Too bright, too clean. Occasionally, I find one. A strange rectangle at the edge of development. If I zoom in far enough, I sometimes see a small photograph hanging inside a blue-walled room. In it, a clearing, and two bicycles in the weeds. I never zoom in all the way anymore. I'm afraid that if I look too closely, the map will recognize me again. My grandmother used to tell me that the mountain behind our village had a listening side. She didn't mean echoes. She meant that if you spoke carelessly while facing the north slope of Mount Kuratani, something would remember your voice. I grew up in a small village in Gifu Prefecture, the kind that shrinks a little more every year. By the time I entered high school, most of my classmates were planning to leave. I did too. I came back only after my grandmother was placed in a care facility. My parents asked me to sort through her house before it was sold. The house stood at the very edge of the village, closest to the mountain. Behind it ran a narrow irrigation channel, then a steep path leading into cedar forest. The air there always felt cooler. On my second night back, I found an old cassette recorder in the closet. It was wrapped in cloth and tucked inside a wooden box along with several labeled tapes. The labels were written in my grandmother's neat handwriting. North slope, clear. North slope, rain. North slope, after festival. I almost laughed. She had always been superstitious. Still, curiosity won. I inserted one of the tapes into the recorder. The audio was mostly wind, leaves rustling, the faint trickle of water. Then my grandmother's voice.
Soft.
Careful. I am leaving rice at the base of the tree, she said. Please do not follow the children. There was a long pause. Then another voice answered. It was her voice. Exactly the same. I am leaving rice at the base of the tree, it repeated. But the timing was wrong. The echo came too late, and the tone was flatter, stripped of breath. I stopped the tape. The room felt smaller somehow. I told myself it was just the acoustics of the mountain playing tricks, a delayed reflection of sound. The next afternoon, I took the recorder up the path. The cedars were tall and straight, planted decades ago. Their trunks formed tight rows that blocked out much of the sky. The forest floor was soft with needles. About 10 minutes in, I reached a small clearing with a large, split boulder at its center. I remembered it from childhood. This was where my grandmother would leave offerings during certain festivals instead of going to the shrine. She said the shrine faced the wrong direction. I set the recorder down on the boulder. I pressed record. For a moment, I felt foolish. Then I said, clearly, I've come back. The forest absorbed my words. I waited. Nothing happened. I almost turned off the recorder. Then, from somewhere deeper among the trees, I heard it. I've come back. My voice. The same pitch. The same rhythm. But it didn't come from where I was facing. It came from behind me. I spun around. The trees stood motionless. The light filtering through them had shifted slightly, though I was sure only a few seconds had passed. I don't live here anymore, I said, my mouth dry. Silence. Then, I don't live here anymore. Closer. To my left. I grabbed the recorder. The red light was still on. The tape wheels turned steadily. I didn't wait for another response. I hurried down the path, resisting the urge to run. Halfway back to the house, I heard something moving parallel to me in the trees. Not footsteps, more like the careful displacement of branches, keeping pace. When I reached the irrigation channel, the sound stopped. That night, I played back the tape. At first, it was just wind. Then my voice. I've come back. A pause. Then the reply. But on the recording, it didn't match what I'd heard. Instead of repeating my words exactly, the second voice said, You've come back. The tone was gentle, familiar, and beneath it, layered so faintly I almost missed it, were other voices, whispers, fragments of sentences, children laughing, an old man coughing, my grandmother humming a festival song, all woven together, barely audible. I stopped the tape and ejected it. On the strip of white label, beneath my grandmother's handwriting, something new had been written, in ink darker than hers. North Slope, clear, returned. I hadn't written that. The next morning, I asked an elderly neighbor about the mountain. She frowned when I mentioned the North Slope. We don't go there, she said. Not since the landslide. What landslide? She looked at me strangely. The one that buried 3 houses. Before you were born. I had never heard about that. She shook her head. Your grandmother used to bring food up there every year. Said it kept them from walking. Walking where? But she had already begun closing her door. That evening, I heard my grandmother's voice in the yard. Clear as day. Calling my name. I stepped outside. The sky was overcast, heavy with the promise of rain. She stood near the irrigation channel, her back to me, wearing the same faded cardigan she always wore in autumn. Grandma? I said. She didn't turn around. Don't face it when you speak, she said. Her voice was steady. It prefers your mouth. The air behind me shifted. I became aware of the mountain. Not visually, physically, as if something vast and patient were leaning closer, aligning itself with my spine. From the forest came a low murmur, hundreds of overlapping breaths. Testing. I kept my eyes on my grandmother's back. I brought the recorder, I whispered. That was unkind, she replied. The murmuring grew louder. In it, I could pick out phrases. I've come back. You've come back. Don't follow the children. Please. The voices layered, correcting each other, refining the words. My grandmother finally turned. Her face was wrong, not distorted, just slightly delayed from her movements, like a mask adjusting to fit. That side listens, she said gently, and it keeps what it hears. Behind her, the cedar trunks seemed closer together than before, the spaces between them narrowing. I realized then that the village had been shrinking for years not because people left, but because something had been learning to speak them correctly. The next morning, the house felt emptier. My suitcase stood by the door, packed. I didn't remember doing it. On the table lay the cassette recorder, a fresh tape inside, labeled in careful handwriting. My name, Clear. I haven't gone back up the mountain, but sometimes, when I speak aloud in my apartment in Nagoya, I hear a slight delay at the end of my sentences. A version of my voice that finishes half a breath after I do. Not from outside, from just behind my teeth, as if the listening side of Mount Koratani found a way to follow, and is still practicing, waiting until it can say my name, without hesitation. When my older brother bought a house in rural Akita, he insisted it wasn't because it was cheap. It's quiet, he told me. You can actually think here. The house stood alone at the edge of a harvested rice field. Beyond it, low hills rolled into dark forest. The nearest neighbor was a 15-minute walk down a narrow road lined with cracked irrigation ditches. I visited in late November after the harvest. The fields were bare and stubbled, the soil pale under a washed-out sky. Inside, the house smelled faintly of tatami and cold air. My brother had renovated most of it, but one room at the back remained untouched, a 6-mat tatami room with an old sliding door that stuck in its frame. I'm using that one for storage, he said quickly when I tried to open it. The floor's uneven. He changed the subject too fast. That night I woke up because I couldn't hear the wind. It had been rattling the shutters earlier. Now there was nothing. No insects. No distant cars. I lay still, adjusting to the dark. Then I heard it. Breathing. Not mine. Slow and steady, coming from somewhere in the house. I told myself it was my brother. The walls were thin. Old houses carry sounds strangely, but the rhythm didn't change. It didn't shift or catch the way sleeping breath does. It was perfectly consistent. I checked my phone. No signal. I got up quietly and slid my door open. The hallway was dim, lit only by faint moonlight filtering through frosted glass. The breathing was clearer now. It was coming from the back of the house, from the storage room. I hesitated outside the sliding door. The wood felt cold under my fingers. The breathing continued, calm and unhurried. I knocked lightly. "Hey," I whispered. "Are you in there?" The breathing stopped. The silence that followed felt thick, almost physical. Then, after several seconds, it resumed. Exactly the same as before. I stepped back. My brother's bedroom door was slightly ajar. I could see the outline of his futon inside. I pushed the door open. The room was empty. The futon was folded neatly against the wall. I checked the bathroom. Empty. The front door was still locked from the inside. The breathing continued. I went back to the storage room. This time, I pulled the sliding door open. The room was darker than the rest of the house. Stacks of cardboard boxes lined the walls. Old furniture was draped in white sheets. In the center of the room, the tatami dipped slightly, as if something heavy rested there. The breathing came from that depression, but there was nothing visible. The tatami fibers shifted subtly with each inhale. I couldn't move. The air felt colder here, thin in my lungs. "Who's there?" I asked, my voice barely audible. The breathing stopped again. Slowly, the tatami in the center began to rise. Not as if something were standing up. More like the floor itself were swelling. The woven surface stretched, the pattern distorting. A shape pressed upward from beneath. Broad. Roughly human-sized. I stumbled backward into the hallway. The swelling subsided. The tatami settled flat again. The breathing resumed, steady and patient. I didn't sleep. I sat in the kitchen until dawn. When light finally filled the house, everything looked normal. The storage room was just a storage room. The tatami lay smooth and undisturbed. When my brother returned around noon, carrying groceries, I asked him where he had gone. Gone, he said. I was here. You weren't in your room. He stared at me. I haven't left the house in 3 days. We stood in the kitchen, facing each other. I noticed then that there were no shoes in the jankan except mine. His usual pair of boots was missing. Where are your shoes? I asked. He looked down, confused. I don't wear boots, he said. You always wear boots. He smiled slightly. No, I don't. That night, the breathing started earlier. Not just from the storage room, from the walls, from beneath the floorboards. Multiple rhythms now, overlapping but never syncing. I pressed my ear to the tatami in the living room. Underneath, something shifted in response, as if aware of the attention. My brother sat across from me, watching television. The volume was low. He didn't seem to hear anything unusual. Does this house feel different to you? I asked. He muted the TV. What do you mean? Like it's full. He frowned. It's always been full. Of what? He looked toward the back of the house. Of us. That night, I locked my bedroom door. It didn't help. The breathing gathered outside it, just beyond the thin wood. Dozens of slow inhalations. Exhalations brushing the door in unison. At some point, exhaustion pulled me into a shallow sleep. I woke up to weight on my chest. Not crushing, just resting there, as if someone had laid down carefully across me. I couldn't move. I couldn't open my mouth. The breathing was directly against my face now. Warm. Measured. Something shifted slightly, adjusting its position. The weight conformed to my body perfectly, as if it had been waiting for the exact shape. In the dim light, I saw an outline hovering inches above me. Not a face, just an absence in the air, bending the darkness around it. Then I heard my own voice, from the hallway, calling my brother's name, softly, confused. Where are you? The weight on my chest inhaled deeply. My brother answered from the kitchen. I'm here. There was a pause. Then my voice again. No, you're not. The thing above me exhaled slowly, satisfied. In the morning, the house was quiet. Too quiet. I walked to the kitchen. My brother sat at the table, drinking tea. He looked up and smiled. You're staying longer, right? He asked. I opened my mouth to reply, but for a moment, I couldn't remember what I had planned. The storage room door stood open behind him. The tatami inside dipped slightly in the center. Breathing. Steady. Patient. Waiting for the house to become a little more full. I used to moderate a small Japanese live streaming platform, not one of the big ones. This one was older, clunky, mostly used by people in rural areas with slow connections. The interface hadn't changed since the early 2000s. Gray background, tiny comment box, usernames in plain text. My job was simple: review flagged streams, ban obvious trolls, make sure nothing illegal stayed up too long. Most nights were boring. Cooking streams, people playing old games, someone practicing shamisen in their bedroom. Then one night, a stream appeared in the queue with no title. The thumbnail was almost completely dark. The username was just a string of hiragana. Outside the window, it had already gathered a few viewers. I clicked it. The video showed a room lit only by a small desk lamp. The camera faced a window with thin curtains. Beyond them, it was night. The chat scrolled slowly. Is this frozen? Can you move the camera? Where is this? The streamer wasn't visible. The camera remained fixed on the window. After about a minute, I noticed something. The curtains were slightly billowing inward, as if the window were open. But there was no sound of wind. No ambient noise at all. The audio bar at the bottom of the player was completely flat. Someone in chat typed, "There's someone out there." I leaned closer to my screen. At first, I didn't see it. Then I noticed a darker shape against the darkness outside. A vertical distortion, like a silhouette standing very close to the glass. Too close. The chat began to speed up. Is that a person? This isn't funny. Close the window. The silhouette didn't move. It didn't sway or shift like a tree. It was perfectly still. Then, slowly, the curtain on the left tightened. Not blown, pulled from outside. The fabric stretched toward the window pane. The silhouette remained fixed. The chat exploded. Call the police. Turn on the lights. Run. I reached for the internal tools to freeze the stream. Before I could, the curtain snapped back into place. The silhouette was gone. The window was just a black square again. The viewer count began dropping. Troll. Pre-recorded. Boring. Then the camera moved. Just slightly. Tilting down. The desk lamp came into clearer view. On the desk was a smartphone. Its screen was on. I recognized the interface. It was the same streaming platform. The phone was showing the live stream. Our live stream. From the same angle. But in the phone's version, the silhouette was still there. Standing outside the window. The real window behind the desk was empty. The one on the phone showed the figure. The chat noticed too. Wait. Why is it still there? Look at the phone. The phone screen showed the silhouette raise an arm. Slowly. Pressing a hand against the glass. In the real room, nothing touched the window. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. I checked the IP information attached to the stream. The location field was blank. Not hidden. Blank. As if it weren't broadcasting from anywhere. The phone on the desk buzzed silently. A notification appeared. A new comment. From a username I recognized. Mine. You're watching too closely. I froze. In the live chat on my monitor, my account hadn't posted anything. But on the phone screen in the stream, the message was there. From me. The silhouette outside the window leaned closer. Its face pressed against the glass. There were no features. Just a smooth, pale oval where a face should be. The curtain lifted again. But this time, from inside the room. As if someone just out of frame had pulled it aside. The camera didn't move. It didn't need to. Because in the reflection on the window, I saw the streamer. Standing behind the camera. Facing the window. It looked like me. Same haircut. Same headset around the neck. Same dark hoodie I was wearing at that moment. The reflection me lifted its hand. And waved. I jerked back from my desk. The stream cut to black. The page refreshed automatically. This stream is no longer available. I sat in silence for a long time. Then my dashboard pinged. A new stream had started. No title. No thumbnail. Username. Inside the window. My hands were shaking as I clicked it. The video showed a dark room. My room. My desk. My monitor glowing faintly. The camera angle was from outside my apartment window. Looking in. I live on the 7th floor. There is no balcony. The chat was already active. He sees it now. Don't turn around. It's right behind the screen. The audio bar was flat. No sound. On the desk in the video, my phone lit up. A notification. From the streaming platform. New comment from. Switch places. I didn't want to look behind me. I could see my own reflection faintly in the black parts of my monitor. Behind my reflection, something taller stood in the darkness of my apartment. Too close. Its head slightly tilted, watching the back of my skull. The chat continued to scroll. Don't let it face you. Don't let it learn your expression. My cursor wouldn't move. The stream showed my reflection starting to turn. Not in real time. A fraction of a second ahead of me. On the screen, I was already halfway around. In my room, I was still facing forward. The thing behind me was clearer now in the video. Its face smooth and pale. Waiting for mine to complete the motion. Waiting to copy it. The last thing I saw before my monitor went dark was my own face on the stream. Perfectly centered. Smiling gently, as if greeting someone through glass. I haven't logged back into the platform since. But sometimes when my laptop screen goes black, I see a faint reflection that moves a little too late, or a little too early, and I don't know anymore which side of the window I'm on. When I was hired to catalog donations for a small museum in Shermaine, I expected pottery, farm tools, maybe old festival masks. I didn't expect teeth. The museum stood near the edge of Matsue, not far from Lake Shinji. It focused on local folklore, kappa stories, old shrine relics, farming implements from the Edo period. Most donations came from families clearing out Kura storehouses after a relative moved into assisted living. One afternoon, a sealed wooden box arrived without a return address. No one remembered accepting it. It was already logged into the intake ledger in neat handwriting that didn't match any of ours. Under description, it simply said, "Household item. Do not display." Asked my supervisor, Takahashi-san, about it. He frowned. If it's logged, we must process it. The box was surprisingly light. Inside, wrapped in layers of yellowed newspaper from the 1970s, was a ceramic bowl, white glaze. Modest. The kind you'd use for rice. At first glance, it was ordinary. Then I looked closer. The inner surface wasn't smooth. Embedded into the ceramic, just beneath the glaze, were small shapes. Oval, off-white, uniform in size. Teeth. Human molars, arranged in a neat ring along the inner curve of the bowl. Their roots were buried in the clay, crowns exposed just enough to be visible under the glossy surface. I felt a wave of nausea. "They're real," I said quietly. Takahashi-san adjusted his glasses. "Probably from a dental clinic," he said too quickly. "Training material. But no clinic would mount them like this." The arrangement was deliberate, almost decorative. We searched the archives for similar artifacts. Nothing. No mention in local folklore of bowls lined with teeth. Still, protocol required documentation. I photographed it from multiple angles. Each time, the camera struggled to focus on the interior. The teeth seemed slightly blurred in every image, as if resisting clarity. That night, I stayed late to finish the catalog entry. The museum was silent after hours. The security lights cast long shadows between glass cases. The bowl sat on a table in the storage room. I couldn't stop glancing at it. The teeth looked slightly different under fluorescent light. Sharper, more defined, as if they had shifted. I told myself it was imagination. At some point past 9, I heard a faint clicking sound. Soft. Irregular. I froze. The sound came again, from the storage room. I stood slowly and walked toward it. The door was ajar. Inside, the bowl sat exactly where we'd left it. The clicking continued. Tiny impacts, like porcelain tapping against porcelain. I stepped closer. The teeth were moving, not visibly jerking, but subtly adjusting, each one tilting slightly inward, toward the center of the bowl. The clicking sound was their enamel touching. I stumbled back, heart hammering. The room felt colder. The air smelled faintly metallic. The teeth stopped, all angled now toward the center, as if anticipating something. I leaned forward despite myself. In the glossy white base of the bowl, I saw a reflection. Not mine. The ceiling lights were behind me, but the reflection showed a face hovering directly above the bowl. Mouth open, wide. The teeth in the reflection were missing. The gums dark and hollow. I spun around. The storage room was empty. When I looked back at the bowl, the interior was still. The teeth lay flat against the glaze again, perfectly embedded, as if they had never moved. I locked the storage room and went home. That night, I dreamed I was eating plain white rice. Each bite felt pretty, crunching softly between my molars. In the dream, I tried to spit it out, but my mouth wouldn't open. I woke with a sharp pain in my jaw. The next morning, my lower left molar felt loose. I assumed I had been grinding my teeth in my sleep. Stress. I went to work. The bowl was no longer in storage. It sat in the main exhibit hall, centered inside a glass display case. The label beneath it had been printed and mounted. Local ritual object, donated anonymously. The description was detailed. It claimed the bowl had been used in a harvest rite to ensure strong teeth and healthy children. It cited sources, footnotes, none of which existed in our archives. Takahashi-sen, I said, my voice tight. Who approved this display? He looked confused. You did, he replied. He showed me the approval form. My signature was at the bottom. The date was from 3 days earlier. I had never seen it before. The rest of the staff treated the bowl as if it had always been part of the collection. Visitors paused in front of it, peering inside. Some laughed uncomfortably. A child pointed at it and cried. By afternoon, my jaw pain had worsened. In the staff bathroom, I checked my mouth in the mirror. The loose molar shifted under my tongue. I touched it gently. It came free. No blood. No pain. It simply detached, resting in my palm.
Smooth. Clean.
As if it had never been rooted. I stared at the empty space in the mirror. The gum looked seamless. Unbroken. Back in the exhibit hall, the bowl gleamed under spotlights. I stepped closer. There, nestled between two molars near the rim, was a fresh tooth. Still faintly wet. Identical to mine. The arrangement had expanded slightly to accommodate it. No one else seemed to notice. I tried to lift the glass case. It wouldn't budge. I called out to Takahashi-san, but my voice sounded wrong.
Thick.
Unfamiliar. I felt something shift inside my mouth. Another tooth loosened. Then another. They slid free one by one, collecting behind my lips. I tried to spit them out, but my jaw wouldn't open. Across the room, I saw a child staring at me, his hand pressed to his cheek, his expression confused. He opened his mouth slightly, and a tooth fell into his palm. The bowl's glaze shimmered. The teeth inside angled inward again. Waiting, I ran, out of the museum, down the quiet street toward the lake. My mouth felt hollow now.
Light.
Each step jarred something loose. I tasted ceramic. That night, I avoided mirrors. I haven't returned to work. The museum's website updated yesterday. A new featured artifact on the homepage. The photograph is clearer than any I took. The bowl looks almost full now. The description has changed. It no longer mentions harvest rights. It says the object is self-sustaining. And beneath that, in smaller text, donations are ongoing. The first time I noticed it, I was hanging laundry behind my parents' house. It was late afternoon in Hinode, the mountains already turning blue with evening. The sun was low enough to stretch my shadow across the gravel yard and up the concrete wall of the storage shed. I lifted a wet shirt to clip it to the line. My shadow didn't. It lagged half a second behind, like a delayed video. I froze, clothespin between my fingers. Then it caught up. I told myself it was the angle of the light, the sun slipping behind clouds. Anything simple. I had moved back to Hinode in Gifu Prefecture last year after losing my job in Nagoya. It's a small mountain town where everyone knows who your grandparents were and which elementary school you attended. The river runs behind the school grounds, and at night you can hear it from almost anywhere. There's an old custom here that most people under 40 treat as a harmless curiosity. Kageo Kuri, sending the shadow. During Obon, on the final night, when families light small fires to guide their ancestors, children stand under lanterns and stare at their own shadows. After several seconds, they look up at the sky. If they do it properly, they'll see the shape of their shadow floating upward for just a moment. The elders say it proves that something inside you can step away from your body. When I was 7, my grandmother made me try it at the shrine clearing behind her house. I remember the smell of smoke and summer grass. I stared at my shadow on the dirt until my eyes watered. "Don't let it linger," she whispered. "Call it back." I looked up. For a fraction of a second, I saw a darker shape against the stars. The outline of a child, thinner than me. Then it vanished. I burst into tears. My grandmother didn't scold me. She looked relieved. Last summer, the Shrine Committee decided to revive Kageo Kuri as a public event. They said it would attract tourists. They installed bright LED floodlights to create clearer shadows for photos. I volunteered to help set up. About 30 children lined up in the clearing, parents holding up smartphones. The floodlights were so bright the shadows looked solid, almost physical, stretching across the packed earth. 3, 2, 1. The children stared down at the ground. Then they looked up together. Parents laughed. Some kids claimed they saw their shadows rise. But one boy didn't laugh. He kept staring at the sky long after the others stopped. His mother tugged at his sleeve. "Did you see it?" He nodded slowly. His face was pale. After the crowd dispersed, I walked across the clearing to collect empty drink bottles. That's when I saw it. On the dirt, among scuffed footprints, was a dark silhouette shaped like a child. Not cast by anything, just a flat, human outline pressed into the ground. I blinked, expecting it to shift with the light. It didn't. When I glanced away and back again, it was gone. The next morning, the boy who had kept staring upward was missing. Search teams combed the forest. Volunteers checked the riverbanks. The town loudspeaker announced updates every few hours. Nothing was found. People spoke in careful, hushed tones at the supermarket. They avoided mentioning the festival directly. I started noticing changes after that. At dusk, shadows along the road seemed slightly misaligned with their owners. A shoulder too sharp, a head tilted at the wrong angle. One evening, I walked home under a street lamp near the post office. My shadow stretched long in front of me. I lifted my left arm. The shadow's arm remained at its side. I stopped breathing. After a moment, it raised its arm, but not the same one. It mirrored me incorrectly. I stepped out of the light. It snapped back into place beneath my feet. I didn't tell anyone. Instead, I searched online archives. An old local forum from 2009 mentioned Hino Days Obon Festival. Second incident in 5 years. Grandmother warned them not to let it linger. Shadow didn't return. The thread ended abruptly. I asked my grandmother about it during a visit to the care home last winter. When I said Kageo Kiri, her fingers tightened around her blanket. "It's not about seeing it leave," she said. "It's about making sure it comes back to the right place." I asked what happens if it doesn't. She looked past me, at the wall behind my shoulder. "That depends," she murmured, "on which one of you feels more at home." She passed away in early spring. Since then, the delays have grown longer. In bright sunlight, my shadow sometimes moves a breath too late. In fluorescent light at the supermarket, it stands straighter than I do. Yesterday morning, I tested it deliberately. I stood in my room and turned on my phone's flashlight, pointing it at my hand. 5 fingers. On the wall, there were 5. Then, slowly, a 6th shape pressed itself between them. Thin, almost hesitant. I dropped the phone. When I picked it up again, it was normal. Last night, I went back to the shrine clearing alone. No lanterns, no floodlights, just the torii gate and the dark line of cedar trees. I stood where the children had stood. I turned on my phone's flashlight and aimed it at the ground in front of me. My shadow formed clearly on the dirt. I stared at it. "Come back," I whispered, though I wasn't sure why. It began to detach. Not rising upward like in the stories. Sliding forward. It peeled away from my feet as if it had weight, dragging itself across the ground toward the trees. For a second, I saw its outline clearly, a human shape moving independently, flat and silent. Then it slipped between the trunks. The forest swallowed it. I was left standing in the clearing. The beam from my phone shone onto bearer. No shadow at all. I moved my arm. Nothing followed. I laughed at first. A strange sound that didn't feel like mine. I walked home under every streetlight I could find. Each one cast only my body, illuminated and alone. No dark shape at my feet. When I reached my house, I turned on all the lights. I stood in the center of my room. The walls were blank. The floor was blank. Just me. Relief flooded in so quickly my knees weakened. Then I noticed something near the door. A darker patch on the tatami. Not attached to me. It was upright. Its head slightly tilted, as if curious.
It was shaped exactly like me.
When I took a step back, it didn't follow. When I raised my hand, it stayed still. And when I turned off the light, I felt something settle perfectly into place beneath my feet. This morning, my shadow moves exactly as it should. Perfectly synchronized. Too perfectly. It never hesitates now. It never lags. But sometimes, when I stand very still in the afternoon sun, I feel an urge to walk toward the forest behind the shrine. Not because I'm afraid, because something out there is waiting in the clearing, and it wants its place back. When the snow started falling in May, everyone in town pretended it wasn't strange. A light dusting at first, white specks drifting past the supermarket windows, settling on the asphalt in front of the station. Hinamizawa isn't far north enough for that. By Golden Week, we're usually complaining about humidity, not brushing flakes off our jackets. It's just leftover cold air, the cashier at the drugstore said with a shrug. The weather forecast showed clear skies. By evening, the snow had stopped. By morning, it was gone. Except it wasn't snow. I found that out 3 days later. I worked the late shift at a business hotel near Lake Suwa in Nagano. Nothing fancy, just salarymen, occasional tourists, and truck drivers passing through. The lake was calm that week, reflecting the mountains like dark glass. On my break, I stepped outside to smoke. I don't even like smoking, but it gives me an excuse to stand alone. That's when I noticed something white gathered along the edge of the parking lot, caught in the curb like dirty slush. It hadn't melted. I crouched down and touched it. It wasn't cold. It felt like damp paper pulp. When I rubbed it between my fingers, it separated into thin fibers.
Hair.
Very fine, very pale, so light it looked white. I stood up too quickly. All along the curb, in the drainage grates, against the vending machines, were thin drifts of it, as if the town had been dusted with shredded hair instead of snow. I went back inside and washed my hands twice. That night, guests began complaining. Your showers are clogged. There's something in the sink. Housekeeping found the same pale strands packed into every drain in the building. Not just ours. Other hotels posted similar notices in a local staff group chat. One of the older cleaners, Tanaka-san, held up a clump with gloved hands. It's like someone cut their hair over the whole town, she muttered. Except it wasn't cut. Each strand was long, some over 30 centimeters. No blunt ends. They tapered naturally, like it had fallen out. The second snowfall came a week later, heavier this time. It drifted down in silence, illuminated by the street lights along the lake. Tourists stopped to take photos, laughing. It's like a miracle, someone said. I didn't go outside. From the lobby window, I watched it accumulate on parked cars, on the shrine steps across the street, on the bronze statue of a swan near the water. It didn't melt. By morning, the town looked powdered white. The city office released a statement calling it unusual airborne plant fibers. They advised residents to sweep it away and avoid inhaling too much. That afternoon, I helped Tanaka-san clear the hotel entrance. We used wide brooms. The fibers clung together in heavy clumps, damp and faintly warm.
Warm.
Does it feel warm to you? I asked. She paused. Don't say things like that, she replied quietly. That night, I dreamed of Lake Suwa. The surface was frozen, which never happens in May. The ice was opaque white. Underneath, something dark shifted slowly, pressing upward. When I woke up, my pillow was covered in pale strands. My heart thudded so hard I felt it in my throat. I turned on the light. The strands were everywhere. On my futon, on my desk, tangled around my phone charger. I grabbed a handful and pulled. They were attached to my scalp. I rushed to the bathroom mirror. My hair looked the same as always, black, shoulder length. But when I ran my fingers through it, pale strands came away in my hand. Not black turning white.
Separate.
Growing alongside my own. Over the next few days, more people began wearing hats indoors. At the supermarket, I saw a high school girl scratching her head frantically near the instant noodles aisle. When she pulled her hand away, it was threaded with white. The lake changed too. Fishermen stopped going out because their nets came up heavy and tangled. One of them posted a photo online. The net clogged with pale strands, stretching down into the dark water like roots. The post was deleted within hours. Rumors spread that the snowfall was thickest near the lakeshore shrine. That shrine is small, half forgotten, dedicated to a local water deity no one my age can name. There's an old story about something sealed beneath the lake centuries ago, but every town has stories like that. On my day off, I walked there. The stone steps were coated in white. It looked like frost, but it shifted slightly when the wind passed through. The offering box was buried up to its lats. I brushed the surface with my sleeve. The fibers parted slowly, reluctantly, revealing dark wood underneath. Then they settled back into place, as if breathing. I told myself that was imagination, but I couldn't ignore my own head. Every morning, more pale strands covered my pillow. They were thicker now. When I tied my hair back, I could feel weight pulling unevenly at my scalp. One evening, as I was closing the hotel front doors, I caught my reflection in the glass. For a second, I didn't recognize myself. My silhouette looked wrong. My hair, no, the pale strands were longer than my black hair. They extended past my shoulders, trailing down my back. But when I turned around and grabbed a handful, they only reached my collarbone. The reflection lagged, just slightly, like it was underwater. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., the fire alarm panel flickered briefly. No sound, just a blinking light. I checked the cameras at the front desk. Camera 3 faces the lakeside entrance. The feed was grainy, snowing with static. Except it wasn't static. The entire frame was filled with drifting pale strands, moving sideways as if underwater. In the center of the image, just beyond the glass doors, stood a figure.
Tall.
Hair reaching the ground.
White.
It wasn't facing the hotel. It was facing the lake. The strands around it were rising, not falling, as if being pulled upward from the water. I leaned closer to the screen. The figure's head tilted slightly. The camera feed glitched. For a split second, the figure was gone. In its place, I saw the reflection of the lobby. Empty, except for me, standing at the desk. And behind me, hair cascading over my shoulders, pooling at my feet. Not black.
White.
I spun around. The lobby was empty. My reflection in the dark window looked normal again. Mostly. In the fluorescent light, I could now see that the pale strands weren't separate from my hair anymore. They were emerging directly from my scalp, blending at the roots. The snowfall hasn't stopped since. The city stopped issuing statements. People go to work. Children go to school, wearing white knit caps even indoors. No one comments on how the lake level has risen slightly, though there's been no rain. From my apartment window, I can see the surface at night. It doesn't reflect the moon anymore. It reflects white. Sometimes, when the wind blows from the water, I feel a gentle tug at my head. Not painful, just insistent, like something testing the strength of a line. Tomorrow is my day off. I keep thinking about walking down to the shore, about standing at the edge where the fibers are thickest, about leaning forward just enough to see my reflection clearly in the white surface. I want to know if it will lag again, or if this time it will move first. The first call came at 3:17 a.m. I know the exact time because I had just checked my phone. I couldn't sleep, so I was scrolling through old photos of my university friends, wondering why I ever left Tokyo. The screen dimmed. Then it lit up with an incoming call. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but the area code was local to Toyama. I answered without speaking. For a few seconds, there was only faint static. Then I heard breathing. Slow, careful, like someone trying not to be heard. "Hello," I said. The breathing stopped. The line disconnected. I stared at the ceiling of my one-room apartment, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. Outside, rain tapped against the balcony railing. Nothing unusual. I blocked the number and went back to bed. At 3:17 a.m. the next night, my phone rang again. Different number. Same area code. This time, I didn't say anything. The breathing started immediately. Steady. Rhythmic. I held my own breath to compare. It didn't match. The caller inhaled slightly after I did, like it was following my pattern with a delay. I hung up. By the fourth night, I stopped blocking the numbers.
They always changed.
Always at 3:17. Always breathing. On the fifth night, something else happened. After 10 seconds of breathing, I heard a faint sound in the background. Not a voice. A train announcement. Tinny and distant. I recognized the melody that plays before the announcement at Toyama Station. I had passed through there hundreds of times. The problem was, the last train leaves before midnight. There shouldn't have been any announcements at 3:17 a.m. The next day, I mentioned it to my coworker, Sakamoto. He laughed. Maybe it's a ghost salaryman who missed the last train. I forced a smile. That evening, I decided to stay awake. I made coffee at midnight and kept the lights on. At 3:16, I held my phone in my hand, watching the seconds tick forward. 3:17. The call came. I answered instantly. The breathing was louder this time, closer, and beneath it, I could clearly hear the station melody again. Then a woman's recorded voice. Bound for Kanazawa. Cut off mid-sentence. The breathing quickened. Without thinking, I whispered, "Where are you?" Silence. Then, very softly, I heard my own voice ask the same question. "Where are you?" Not a recording. Not distorted. Perfectly clear. The line went dead. I checked my call log. Duration, midnight. No record of the call. I stared at my phone for a long time. The next morning, on my way to work, I stopped at Toyama Station. I told myself I just wanted to prove something to my imagination. The station in daylight is ordinary. Convenience store, ticket machines, commuters in dark suits. I approached the information desk and asked, as casually as possible, "Are there ever overnight announcements? For maintenance or something?" The attendant frowned.
No.
"The system powers down after the last train." "Completely?" She nodded. That night, I turned my phone off before bed. At 3:17 a.m., I woke up anyway, to the sound of breathing. Not from my phone, from my room. I lay still, heart pounding in my ears. The breathing was faint, uneven, coming from somewhere near the entrance. My apartment is small. From my futon, I can see the Genkin if I tilt my head slightly. The darkness there looked thicker than usual. I reached for my phone. The screen was black, battery at 1%. I was sure it had been fully charged. The breathing stopped. In the silence, I heard something else. The distant melody of Toyama Station.
Soft.
As if carried through water. I forced myself to sit up and turn on the light. The room was empty. The Genken was empty. My front door was locked. But on the floor tiles near the entrance, there were faint wet marks. Two long shapes, like footprints. Except they didn't point toward the door. They pointed inward. The next day, I checked the train schedule history online. There had been an incident at Toyama Station 2 years ago. A person had stepped off the platform after the final train departed. Late at night. No witnesses. The article didn't include many details.
Just a time.
3:17 a.m. I stopped sleeping after that. I kept the lights on. I moved my futon closer to the door, as if that would help. On the seventh night, the call didn't come. Instead, at exactly 3:17, my phone lit up with a notification. Voicemail received. I don't have voicemail activated. My hands trembled as I opened it. The recording was 30 seconds long. At first, only breathing. Then the station melody. Then footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Approaching. Each step slightly uneven, as if one leg dragged. I realized with growing dread that the footsteps weren't echoing like they would in a station. They sounded muffled, like on tatami. Then I heard the soft slide of a door opening. My door. In the recording, the footsteps entered, crossed the room, stopped very close to the microphone.
To me.
For several seconds, there was only breathing, right beside my ear. Then my own voice whispered, "I'm home." The recording ended. I checked the duration in the call details. Midnight. No timestamp. No number attached. I didn't look up immediately. I didn't want to see if something was standing in front of me. Slowly, I lifted my eyes from the phone. Across the room, by the entrance, the darkness looked wrong again.
Taller.
Narrower, like a person standing perfectly still. I told myself it was just the coat rack. I don't own a coat rack. My phone vibrated in my hand. Incoming call. No number. 3:17 a.m. but the clock on my wall read 2:02. The ringtone didn't play through the speaker. It played from somewhere behind me. Close. Breathing filled the room. Not from the phone. From over my shoulder. Careful. Waiting for me to answer. If you're still awake, thank you for staying with me. Leave a comment so I know you made it this far. There will always be another story waiting in the dark. Until next time, let your mind grow quiet and let sleep find you. Good night.